Just outside Cady in County Armagh, on the road to Castleblaney in County Monaghan, a road joins it, a very quiet, desolate road where there are a few houses scattered along the countryside. These houses are mainly inhabited by hedge cutters and bog cutters. And on that road lives a girl, Grainne Daly, and she lives with her widowed mother, as her father, a hedge cutter and wood cutter, is dead, for he died many, many years ago. Now, Grainne Daly's mother is a seamstress, and she works as a housemaid at times for the rich in the area. Now, let me tell you about Grainne Daly. Grainne Daly is a quiet girl of kind heart, but unfortunately, Grainne has a few little things that aren't up to scratch. And when she goes to dances, and you have the women on one side and the men on the other, and where they come over during the night and they talk and court, it doesn't happen with Grainne. Now, this fills Grainne's mother with sadness, and she worries every day that when her time has come, what will become of Grainne. Now, on one night, Grainne and her mother are sitting by the fire, when all of a sudden they hear clip, clop of a horse coming. Oh, says Grainne to her mother, who could that be? As custom at the time, when strangers came to our door, the Irish custom always was that we invited them in, give them a bite to eat, something to drink, and a bit of a rest before they went on their merry way. But Grainne was filled with fear. And that night she said to her mother, she said, it could be robbers. Her mother looked at her and said, Grainne, it might be some traveller, weary and tired. Let's help him. So all of a sudden she opened the door, and there stood in front of her was a man. Now, Grainne's mother was a bit unsure when she looked at him, for he wore breeches to the knees that hadn't been worn in years gone by. He wore a long coat, and he had a brooch tying it at the neck. On top he had a hat, but the hat covered his eyes and his face. But Grainne's mother stood back, for there was a fear in her when she seen these red, evil, piercing eyes. But he put his hand out, and on his hand he wore a metal gauntlet. And he shook hands and he introduced himself as Teddy Walsh from Killycard in County Monaghan. And he asked, is this the house of Grainne Daly? Of course it is, says the mother. And how would you know Grainne? So he said, may I come in, please? So, as was the custom, she invited him in. And in he came. Now, he didn't remove his hat or his coat, yet he sat by the fire. And Grainne's mother offered him a cup of tea or something to eat. But he said no, he was only after eating. Now, he said he was from just outside Castleblaney in Monaghan, in a small area called Killycard. And he said he had seen Grainne at a funeral in Cady a couple of weeks prior. And he says, I would just like to spend some time and call every so often to see Grainne. Now, the mother looked at Grainne, and Grainne stiffened up in the chair. But with that, spotting what was happening, Teddy Walsh put his hand into his pocket and he pulled out a gold coin. Mrs. Daly, he says, I give you this as a gift. For wasting your time, it'll be worth it. And Grainne's mother looked at the gold coin. Now, that was more money than Grainne Daly's mother would earn in a year. But before she took it, she looked over at Grainne out of the corner of her eye, and Grainne had frozen. And Mrs. Daly looked back, but Teddy Walsh had been around a long time, and sensing that there might be a negative response, he put his hand in again, and he pulled out 2 more gold coins. Now, Mrs. Daly's eyes lit up, 3 gold coins. And she looked at Grainne, and Grainne nodded, and she took the coins. Now, Teddy Walsh said to Mrs. Daly, I will call every so often for the company of Grainne. So when he left, Grainne and her mother, as a mother and daughter will do, they spoke. And the one thing they spoke about was that there was a stiffness in Teddy Walsh's movement, and a smell, the odour. It was pungent. It nearly burnt the hairs in your nose. And Grainne said to her mother, she says, oh mother, she said, whatever you do, do not leave me alone in the company of that horrid man. Now, a couple of days passed, and the clippity-clop came by the house again, and it was Thady Walsh. And Thady Walsh called. Now, he had stated that his wife was dead, but he paused. And any time he spoke of people that were long gone and wasn't aware of things that were happening in the present time, which Grainne and her mother found very strange. But on each occasion he left them 3 gold coins. Now eventually they were able to get more products in, they were able to get more material and seamstress. And for once, Grainne Daly's mother actually had some money, and she thought, looking forward, maybe I don't have to worry too much about Grainne. While she's not maybe going to get a husband, there will be enough for her. Now, over the next couple of weeks and months, Thady Walsh called maybe 7 or 8 times. But on one night he called, and as he came in, they noted that his movement was very stiff. And the odour was worse than it ever had been. And he sat down. But whatever way the candlelight and the fire flickered, they seen a bit of his face. And it looked like rotten skin. But these 2 red, piercing, evil eyes looked everywhere. And he said to Mrs. Daly, he says, Mrs. Daly, I come with a proposition for you and Grainne. As you know, my time is near. I am an elderly man. I would like to marry Grainne. Now with that, Mrs. Daly looked over at Grainne, and Grainne just moved with total fear. And he says, Mrs. Daly, I will make it well worth your while. I will give you 2 days. And he left. Now, Grainne and the mother sat that night and they didn't sleep. They pondered and wondered and worried what would happen. When Grainne Daly's mother said to her, she said, Grainne, look, he's an old man, very, very old. If you marry him, how long is he going to spend? He has loads of gold, of which he has given us. Could you not just do it for a while, marry him, and when he dies, come back home to me? So 2 days later, Thady Walsh called back in the house, and he seemed a bit hyper, moody, all sorts of emotions running through him, and abrupt. And he says, Mrs. Daly, he says, my time is near. He says, have you an answer? And Mrs. Daly looked at Grainne and she says, yes, Mr. Walsh, Grainne will marry you. Perfect, he says. We shall have the wedding in Muckno, which is Muckno Lake in Castleblaney. And Grainne Daly's mother said, well, I have to get a dress, so can we leave it for a week because I'll have to do a dress for myself. And Grainne, when Thady Walsh with the metal gauntlet put the hand out and stopped it, and he says, Mrs. Walsh, we are an old family. The only ones attending the wedding will be my family. And Grainne Daly's mother thought this was a bit odd, and she said, well, we'd have to get Father Cashman, she said, our local parish priest, to marry ye. And he says, no, I have a brother that is a priest. He will marry us. My men will come tomorrow evening and collect Grainne at 12 o'clock. And he left. Now, Grainne Daly was up to high dough. It was due to the abruptness and what she thought was an intimidating manner by Thady Walsh. And she didn't feel safe. But her mother reassured her, counting all the gold, you only might have a couple of weeks. It could be less, and you'll get everything. So 2 nights later, Thady Walsh's men were to come and pick up Grainne. But in the meanwhile, Mrs. Daly still had a little bit of worry, and she met Father Cashman, and she asked him about the Walshes in Killycar, did he know anything? Now he says, I don't, but I'm going into Blaney, he says, in 2 days. And I'm going to meet a Father McKenna, who's an elderly priest, and I will inquire for you. And he left. 2 days later, on the stroke of midnight, that eerie sound was heard of clippity-clop, except it was louder than when Thady Walsh appeared. And Mrs. Walsh, on opening the door, found 4 small men, dressed in same appearance as Thady Walsh. And Grainne Daly was ushered out into the carriage, and it disappeared. About an hour later, there was a very loud clip-clop coming, and it was Father Cashman, who was after riding his horse as fast as he could from Blaney to Mrs. Daly's house. And when he arrived, he said to Mrs. Daly, where is Grainne? Where is she? And Mrs. Daly said, why, she has left. And he says, no, Mrs. Daly, no. I inquired of Father McKenna. There is no Walshes in Killycard in Monaghan, while there was Walshes years ago in Muckno in Castleblaney. They're all dead and gone. And she said, but there's one of them a priest. No, he said, there was one a priest, but he was defrocked for hideous sin. Oh, I must stop this. And he got back on his horse and he raced back in the Castleblaney road from Katie. And when he arrived into Lake Muckno, to where the old chapel was, all it was an old ruin with briars and branches everywhere. But there was a light, an eerie light that shone, and there was a doorway that never existed. And as he pushed back the briars and he entered, he seen what was an old table that had been set for a meal, but there was rats and birds on it. And while it was dark, he could see figures just pondering around the table. But what struck him was, when he looked up at where the altar was, there was a big four-poster bed. But standing at the altar was Thady Walsh, who had taken off his big coat. And he had a purple shirt that matched his breeches. And his skin was falling off rotten. But in the corner stood the forebed where the curtains were open. And peering out of the curtains was a face Father Cashman knew. It was Grainne Daly. And Father Cashman said, stop this in the name of our Lord, he says. Stop this hideous marriage. When Thady Walsh turned around and says, Father, you're in the wrong place. Your God is on a cross and does not belong here. And as Father Cashman reached to pull out his holy water, he tripped over a stone and was unconscious. Now, when he woke the following morning, the bed was gone, the altar, and he looked around, and where the doorway had been the night before lay a plaque. And the plaque read, Walshes, Thady Walsh. And underneath it, which shocked the priest, was, and his wife, Grainne Daly.